A blood-soaked baby's blanket lay on the floor. In the dim moonlight, scratch marks covered the wooden crib. The faint sound of a dog growling echoed to the silent house, deep, protective, and deadly. No human was in sight, but something had entered the baby's room, and something else had fought to stop it. The dog appeared on a winter evening. A storm had knocked out power in the small village, and rain poured like it would never stop. Farah and Asim were returning from the city, having just confirmed that Farah was 2 months pregnant. On the outskirts of the village, they saw it, soaked, shivering, and limping near a tree stump. It didn't bark or whimper. It simply stared at them, its eyes glowing faintly in the car's headlights. Asim stepped out cautiously, expecting it to run or growl, but the dog just lowered its head as if asking to be taken in. From that night on, the dog became a part of their lives. They named it Shadow, though it responded to no name. It never barked, never wagged its tail. It simply followed Farah wherever she went, like a silent, breathing shadow. It would sit by her feet when she sewed, stand outside the bathroom when she showered, and sleep curled up next to the door of their bedroom. What was stranger was how it behaved around the nursery. As soon as they began setting up the baby's room, the dog became restless. It growled at corners that looked empty, sniffed under the crib obsessively, and once even scratched a deep groove into the wooden floor beneath the window. Asim tried to scold it, but Farah, now heavily pregnant, said softly, "He's just watching over us." When the baby was born, a girl they named Noor, the dog changed again. It no longer left the baby's side. It would sleep under her crib, eat only when she was fed, and would stare, unblinking, at the windows during the night. Visitors found it unsettling, especially when they noticed it never blinked around Noor, as if constantly guarding her from something unseen. One evening, an old villager woman came to visit. She took one look at the dog and froze. Her eyes widened with fear. "You brought that into your house? With a newborn?" Asim laughed it off, but the old woman whispered, "That dog isn't normal. It's here for a reason. And if the stories are true, something else is coming too." Farah clutched Noor a little tighter that night, and Shadow sat beside them, ears perked, staring into the darkness. Waiting the first sign was the silence. It was a humid night, the kind that made even the birds too tired to chirp. Farah sat in the living room, rocking Noor to sleep in her arms, while Sim tried to fix the old ceiling fan. Shadow lay motionless on the floor, ears flat, eyes focused on the hallway. When Noor finally drifted off, Farah placed her gently in the crib and turned on the baby monitor. That's when the lights flickered and the power cut out. The room fell into darkness. Noor let out a faint whimper, and Farah instinctively reached for the flashlight on the table. Before she could turn it on, a new sound filled the house. Hissing. At first, it was faint, like wind through dry leaves. But it grew louder. Wet, slithering, coming from the baby monitor. Farah's breath caught in her throat. She turned to Asim. He had gone outside to check the fuse. She was alone. Shadow suddenly stood, muscles tense, tail stiff. With a low growl, he bolted toward the nursery. Farah followed, flashlight trembling in her hands. As she opened the nursery door, the beam of light caught movement. A long, thick shadow darting up the wall and vanishing to the open window. The crib was shaking. Curtains torn. Noor was crying. Shadow stood atop the crib, growling ferociously, saliva dripping from his bared teeth. His fur bristled like quills, and his body blocked the baby completely from whatever had just been there. Farah rushed forward, scooped up Noor, and fell to her knees. For the first time, she saw fear in Shadow's eyes. Not for himself, but for Noor. The next morning, Noor had a high fever. Doctors called it a simple infection, but the timing didn't feel simple at all. The smell in the house changed too, something like rotting leaves and burned sugar. Shadow began pacing day and night. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep. He only watched. When Asim tried to close the nursery window for good, he found scratch marks along the sill. Fresh ones, deep and curved, like something with claws had been trying to get in. Or worse, try and come back. And Shadow? He never left the baby's side again. The village clock struck midnight. It was a full moon, the third since Noor's strange fever had begun. The house had grown quieter over the past few days, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of silence that pressed against your ears. Heavy, watching. Shadow had not barked in weeks, yet his behavior grew stranger by the day. He wouldn't let anyone but Farah near Nor. He would sleep in front of the crib like a statue, his ears always pointed toward the window, his eyes wide open and unblinking. Asim had begun locking the doors at night, adding salt lines near the baby's room on the advice of a desperate village elder. That night, just before midnight, the whispering began. Not voices, exactly sounds. A dragging, hissing rhythm. Barely audible, but Shadow heard it. His body jerked upright. He ran toward the baby's room and slammed the door shut from the inside. Farah screamed and tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Noah was inside, alone except for the dog. Asim grabbed a hammer and began pounding at the door. Then came the growling. Not from Shadow, but from something else. A second sound, a deep, vibrating hiss, rose from behind the door. Furniture crashed. Nora's cries turned into sharp screams. The air outside the room grew icy cold. When the door finally gave way, it burst inward with a deafening crack. Inside, the room was chaos. The crib was splintered, curtains torn to shreds. Blood smeared the walls in long, curling strokes. And in the corner, half buried beneath the broken dresser, lay the thick, pulsing body of a giant snake, its head crushed, its tongue still twitching. Shadow stood in front of Nora's crib, covered in blood, one leg broken, panting heavily. His fur was torn, and deep bite marks laced his back. He had fought, not as a dog, but as something far more ancient and far more determined. Asim rushed Nor, crying but alive. Farah dropped beside Shadow, tears streaming down her face. He looked up at her one last time, blinked slowly, and let his head fall. The sun rose quietly over the village that morning. No one ever saw another snake in that house again. And on Nor's 6th birthday, when she stared into the woods and smiled at nothing, she whispered a name no one had taught her. Shadow true guardians may not speak our language, but their loyalty can silence even the darkest evil. Sometimes, protection comes in the most unlikely form, and those we fear may be the very ones standing between us and the monsters we cannot see. Trust isn't about appearances, it's about actions in our darkest hour.